Thank you all for joining. Today, I'm going to talk to you about hourly versus project-based pricing, a freelancer's guide to maximizing profit. I'm Ben Feifke, and today's October 24th. And this has been kind of, how can I say, these are kind of learnings for me since switching full-time to being an independent data consultant. And yeah, just wanted to, I know that there's other software consultants, data consultants here, or data entrepreneurs, I suppose. So just wanted to share some of these learnings and, some of my experiences and how I'm kind of approaching pricing as a independent data consultant. First things, a little bit about me. I'm born in Boston in the United States. I went to University of Rochester, where I studied Bachelor's of Science in Optics, and I did a Master's in Data Science. And then after that, over the past, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, I don't know, I have to count. I've had various jobs in the data science and machine learning industry. I worked at a US defense contractor. I worked at a publicly traded company. I've worked for a couple of different startups. And that was great. You know, it's awesome to work for large companies where there's big data and a lot of systems. But around, I'd say maybe 3 years ago, I started taking my first forays into entrepreneurship. You know, I took on my first couple of freelancing contracts on Upwork, and I started writing blog posts on Medium and publishing in towards data science. And then in 2024, well, that's this year, around March or so, things were going well enough, and I've decided to finally take the leap to being a full-time independent. So, and what that means, you can see here a picture of me and my sleeping baby. His face isn't actually an emoji, I promise. But he's here helping me, write a proposal for a client. And I started a consultancy called Beyond Data Consulting, where I offer to businesses and startups, custom data solutions, whether it's analytics infrastructure or machine learning proof of concept, all kinds of various things. So you want to be an independent software consultant, or maybe you already are. Well, as it turns out, there's actually a lot of things involved in being a software consultant beyond actually writing software and delivering software solutions, right? You're running a business, right? So you have to do marketing and you have to do lead generation somehow, whether that's content marketing or cold reach outs to possible clients. You have to do sales, right? If you want to deliver a solution to somebody, you have to convince them that they need something and that you're the person to deliver it. You have to, do all this product ideation and write proposals that oftentimes comes along with sales. And then finally, you have to figure out, well, how do I actually want to price my services? And so one thing that was a big point of growing for me over the past 6, 7 months was kind of around this question: how should I price, right? Should I price my services at an hourly rate? Or should I give fixed prices for projects, right? Should I kind of just say, oh, here's my hourly rate, $100 an hour, $200 an hour, whatever it is? Or should I kind of scope out projects and give, fixed prices on those projects, right? Well, as it turns out, a lot of people before me have actually already thought about this and already have quite some, well, let's say polarizing or polarized opinions, right? So first, we look at the consultancy Salsita Software, and they write a whole blog post called "Why We Don't Do Fixed Price Software Projects, and Neither Should You." And their whole contention is that, when you're doing software, it's just the nature of the work that there's just obstacles that come up that you don't foresee. And it's just too big of a risk to basically give fixed prices. You have to charge hourly. Right. And that's, kind of reasonable. Plenty of other industries do things this way. For example, lawyers, right? Lawyers bill usually hourly. You would hardly find lawyers who bill at fixed prices. That's just the nature of some industries. And they believe that that is the nature of the software industry. On the other hand, you have the Seattle data guy. I think he did a talk as well in the data entrepreneurs community. He writes an article, "Why Everyone Loses When You Charge by the Hour, Becoming a Better Consultant." And his whole argument is that, this risk that you take on of there being unforeseen obstacles during the software development process, well, you as the data consultant, you are actually a much better judge of that risk than the client is. And so it is kind of your responsibility to take on that risk. And not only is it your responsibility, but it's also a service that you can provide, right? If you're absorbing risk for the client, you can tell them, I'm going to give you this outcome. It's going to cost this much. Don't worry, I'll take care of the risk. That's a service you provide, and you can basically charge for that service, right? Or Jean-Philippe Abadir, he ran a small but profitable software dev agency for 3 years. He says, I only charge hourly unless you want depression and tears, right? Because, similar reasons, right? Because of the risk involved. Or you have Jonathan Stark, writes an entire book called Hourly Billing is Nuts. Essays on the insanity of trading time for money. It's a great book, by the way. I can highly recommend it. Or you kind of have people who are more in the middle, right? Like this Travis Hubbard, who also runs a software agency. He says, I do both. I only do fixed price projects when the scope is totally nailed down, right? So it's super interesting when you kind of run into one of these things in life, right? Where you have so many experts on one topic that seem to have such strong yet opposing opinions on that topic, right? How can that happen? So before we talk about maybe how that can happen, let's talk about the pros and the cons of hourly versus project-based pricing, because they are obviously, quite different. Well, with hourly pricing, what's nice about it is that the project scope can easily shrink or expand as needed without, any further negotiation. So, right, let's say you start a project, you've estimated it's going to take 100 hours, you build the whole thing, and then the client says, oh, I really like this. Can you also add this feature, please? You said, sure. You bill an extra 20 hours. What's the difference to you? And everybody's happy, right? And what's also nice about hourly pricing is it's a lower risk for you as the consultant, right? If something takes longer, it's just going to take longer. You bill more hours for it, no problem. However, that brings up the first negative, right? If it's a lower risk for you, it's a higher risk for the client, because hours can, sometimes things do go overestimate, and clients basically have to take on that risk. And as a part of that, clients can also get time stress, right, as hours approach the estimates, and they can apply a pressure that negatively impacts the project. So, for example, let's say a client comes to you and say, hey, I want some business intelligence dashboard. And you say, okay, I'm going to have to build this data pipeline, set up this analytics infrastructure, and then I'll build the dashboard, and you'll see the dashboard. They're like, okay, great. And let's say you work on you estimate 100 hours of time to do this, and you do 90 hours of the work, right? So you've built the whole infrastructure, put all the data pipelines in, and now comes time to build the dashboard. The client, you're like, oh, I'm almost done. Dashboard easy, just 10 hours. Well, what the client sees is they see the project, the amount of estimated hours is only 90% done, or is already 90% done. However, I only see about 10 or 20% of the functionality that I actually wanted. I can't take this risk anymore. It's going to go on for a long time. I have to cut it. I have to kill the project. Or they start applying pressure to you as the consultant. You have to say, this part's actually going to be shorter, I promise, right? But you can completely avoid this. You can completely avoid this stress, right? That's kind of a negative of hourly. And the final negative of hourly is, and this is a big one, you have no motivation as a consultant to optimize or improve efficiency, right? You can do a quick thought experiment for this, right? Let's say you estimate something's going to take 10 hours, you're billing at $100 an hour. So your estimated earnings are 1,000. And you just start this project and you find out that there's a tool online, right? And this tool is going to actually make your work take, instead of 10 hours, take 2 hours. So should you use this tool? If you use it, you're doing the project more efficiently, you're working faster. But if you do that, then you're not going to make the same amount as you do. So if you're kind of a self-serving consultant in this case, then what you should do is, well, ignore the tool and work for 10 hours basically. But this is kind of dishonest. And also this is a negative of hourly because you should be motivated to work faster. If you deliver something faster, that should be rewarded with more money, right? Not with less money. So sometimes the incentives on efficiency aren't really aligned. So if we go to project-based, right, the first thing is a bit of a negative, right? If you're working on a project-based pricing, projects can only significantly change upon rescoping and renegotiation. If you price correctly, maybe the client says, can you squeeze this into the delivery? Oh, sure. Can you squeeze that in? Okay, sure. And they say, oh, can you build out this whole other module? Can you build out this whole other dashboard? You say, sorry. You go back, you renegotiate, you write up a new contract, and that can take weeks sometimes, right? So that's kind of a negative. It's higher risk for the consultant, right? Because you are taking on now this risk that your estimates on hours can kind of blow out of proportion. Something that you thought was going to take 100 hours to build ends up taking 500, right? You're kind of taking on that risk, which is can be not great. The real benefit is that it's now a lower risk for the client, and you are kind of by absorbing that risk, making it a lower risk for the client. That's a service that you are providing, right? What's nice also is that a lot of clients that we might work with in software consulting aren't as technically literate as we are. So if you go to a client and you'll say, I'm going to set up Airflow, I'm going to, set it, it's going to be managed on Google Cloud, and I'm going to manage and I'm going to set everything up. I'm going to build some data pipelines, with CI/CD to deploy everything. The client's going to be like, what the heck? I don't care about that. I don't care how this happens. I just want to see my dashboard, man. Right? So the client really wants an outcome. They don't really care how this stuff actually happens because, you're the expert, not them. Right? So for them, it's a much clearer value proposition. I pay a fixed price for a promised outcome. Easy, right? What's also nice about project-based is even though, projects can only change upon rescoping and renegotiation, if you stay within that scope that you've really nailed down with the client, then it's really simple project administration. There's no timesheets. There's no sending an invoice every week, every 2 weeks, nothing like that, right? And that just makes your life easier. That makes everybody's lives easier. Right? You do, however, have a risk as a consultant of there being feature creep, right? This kind of thing of, you're approaching the end and the client says, oh, can you throw this one more thing in? Can you throw that other thing in? That's a bit of a risk. And then finally, unassimilated clients can get kind of sticker shock, right? Sticker shock is, in the sense that they see a price tag that's so high, they're like, I don't want to, I can't pay that. So and this is because, the software consulting industry, or just the consulting industry in general, often does hourly billing, right? So if a project's going to take 200 hours, you're billing at $100 an hour. That's $20,000. But somehow, if you go to the client and say, my hourly rate is 100, I estimate this to be 200 hours, they're like, okay, that's somehow digestible. But if you just give them this, this 200,000, this 20,000 bill up front, they're like, so it can be a little bit scary. And but there's ways to sell around that that kind of sticker shock. But anyway, still a negative. So, what do these actually look like when you use an hourly based pricing versus a project based pricing? What do these actually look like in practice, right? When you have an hourly based price, you kind of just have $100 an hour, let's say, and you might even have that publicly available. You might even have that shared on websites like Upwork, like Fiverr, on some profile somewhere, right? And you basically like ship that out to different customers. This is my rate. This is my hourly rate. Let's make a deal. 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week. This project I estimate is going to take 50 hours, whatever it might be, right? And so you kind of set one constant rate that you kind of give out to different to all of your clients. Of course, you can kind of adjust it a little bit, but if you have it available on some public profile, then it can actually hurt you or be a bit like disingenuous or a bit dishonest if you charge one client $120 an hour and then they come to your profile and they say, oh wait, I see that your profile rate is 100 an hour. Why am I getting this super expensive price? So you just kind of have an hourly rate, right? And so, that kind of plugs in when you're deciding that hourly rate. All you can really say is, what is the hourly worth of my services, right? And then all that added together, I estimate it to be $100 an hour, right? Okay, that's it, simple. But now if you want to do project-based pricing, no longer are you setting a constant rate that you ship out to different clients. Now, every client that you work with, every product that you create, or every solution that you develop or propose and deliver, it's going to have a different price attached to it, right? Maybe one client wants just basic dashboard built on to their project. They'll take that for $5,000. Or maybe a client wants, hey, we just did some machine learning experimentation and we can really add some value here. I want you to set up an entire ML ops infrastructure, train and deploy our first, 2 machine learning products, right? As a kind of proof of concept for the new architecture, so that's a bigger project, like 55,000, right? Something like that. But the big thing here is that when you're deciding the price that you're going to give to a client for a project-based price, a project-based priced project, there's a lot of things that factor into that price, right? There's your cost to deliver, right? You might have an internal cost of your time. So, the labor costs, maybe cloud costs, right? Your cost to deliver. If you hire other people, there's their costs. There's the value to the client, right? If you know that a project is going to be highly valuable to a client, they maybe want it quicker. You can charge a premium. You can charge according to their value rather than to your cost, right? You can charge for the estimated risk that's involved for you, right? If one project is for some I don't know financial advisor, and they just want to get some prices of stocks or see it all in a dashboard or something, right, correlating with signals from the news, something like that. That's not that risky of a project. If the data is not that good, or if there's an issue in the data, you can fix it. It's okay. But if there's somehow doctors are going to be making decisions based on the data that you put in a dashboard or based on the data that a model says, and they can come after you if some data is bad, as they should, because it's patient outcomes. That's higher risk, right? And you can charge for that higher risk. There might be administrative overhead, all the stuff about writing proposals. It's another kind of part of cost to deliver, right? If you're hiring people for the project and you have to kind of have team meetings or stuff like that, that's kind of included in your cost to deliver. And then finally, there's the value to you, right? So for example, if the client is like a big name client, some big tech company, and you're like, what, I really want to say on my website that I worked with this big client. Maybe you're willing to take a slightly smaller price so that you can sweeten the deal, right? And you can get this kind of testimonial for your consultancy website that you really like. Or maybe if somehow that the relationship is going to be long, like a long-term relationship that's going to, lead to more projects, maybe you'll say, what, I'll give a discount for like, kind of a kickoff project, right? So all these things kind of factor together into helping you determine a price for a project. So compared to hourly, you actually have a lot more options for price customization, right? So where does that leave us, right? Good pricing model, bad pricing model. There's no such thing. There are only pricing models, right? And that's because the reality of software consulting work is that not all software consulting work is equal, right? The choice for hourly or project-based pricing depends entirely upon the type of work at hand and the type of work that you want to do, right? So let's just compare them, hourly versus project-based. Hourly pricing is really good for temporary tech employment, right? Let's say you want to go and work at a, there's a tech company. They're like, hey, our model's not performing so well. Our model's not performing so well. We want you to come in and kind of do some feature engineering research, make things better, right? They already know what a data scientist is. They know what machine learning is. So you can just kind of fit into one of their teams, something like that. Basically, it's really good for chipping away at some problem with an unclear scope. Or generally, it's good for singularly functional projects that kind of correlate well to an hourly valuation of services. Like, hey, the example I just gave was perfect, and it's actually from an example from my experience, right? Where it's like, hey, just join our tech team, please chip away at some of these problems. We want to improve this service with machine learning and that service. Just keep researching until you find something, right? And so examples of this from my experience are, well, like I said, hey, please come do some machine learning proof of concepts for my business until we feel like we've exhausted the data's value, or I also worked on a project where somebody was like, hey, they just found me and they're like, hey, please fix this emergency bug for me. I need it done in like 24, 48 hours. Can you solve that, right? And that's kind of like, you don't want the administrative overhead. It's kind of an unclear scope, right? You're fixing a bug on a system that you've never seen before. So, it really fits well to hourly-based pricing. So for project-based pricing is really good for building end-to-end products or MVPs for clients, especially when those clients aren't as technically literate, like maybe some tech organization might be, right? It's great for fixed scope work, right? Where you've really got the scope nailed down, you know what features need to be delivered. And it's also really good for multifunctional projects that don't really correlate well to a singular hourly valuation of services, but correlate very well to a particular outcome. And this starts to become critical when you start hiring people for working on a project for a client, right? There's kind of multiple functions that need to go on. There's no single person that can do all of the functions that a project requires well, right? So for that, it's nice if you can give a project-based price and then handle the labor costs on your own, right? So some examples of this from my end are, one client wanted me to build an end-to-end analytics platform for them. Another client was like, hey, I'm running all these business processes. I'm crunching some data and delivering reports to clients. I'm doing it all manually on my computer. Let's migrate to the cloud, right? And make it all automated. So what does this all look like for me, right? Because hourly, project-based, maybe it depends on where you are, what you want can change, right? Well, for me, the journey that I'm on, I'm kind of visualize what I call the independent tech consultant ladder, right? So you start with hourly priced consulting, right? And this is really great if you've just kind of become independent, you're trying to build up some of your street credit, make a name for yourself. And you're happy to work on stuff that's kind of more similar to employment, right? A lot of people who become tech consultants, software consultants like myself, are more familiar with kind of an employment-based model where there is hourly pricing. Then after that, it's moving into solo project priced consulting, and then after that, it's agency project priced consulting. Where you're starting to hire people out, you're taking on bigger projects, and you're starting to hire people out to do some functions, right? So that the client can get the most success that they want or that they need, right? So just some examples for me, I did my first, and these are just selections from some of my own experiences in this kind of journey of mine. I started my first I started my first freelancing contract back in 2022. It was hourly. It was from Upwork. And there I was kind of, fitting into a small building energy performance monitoring consulting firm. It's a bit of a mouthful. Just kind of working on their team, fixing some code, increasing, adding features to this code base that they were doing because they were doing some reporting of data to send to their clients, and just kind of a, mishmash of different, data and Python related activities, right? So then after that, in May of this year, shortly after I started, I, kind of like one of the examples I said on the prior slide, right? I had an hourly contract where I was debugging an error in some cloud data warehouse. Then another one after that, my first fixed price project was around in July. I was building an analytics system for a property development company. They were doing some web scraping to find, of real estate listings, and they wanted to, use some proprietary metrics to evaluate kind of the investment opportunity in some of those real estate listings. So kind of making a custom dashboard, a custom analytics infrastructure and data pipeline giving a fixed price for an outcome. All they cared about was seeing this dashboard. They didn't really know what happened behind the scenes. After that, I started another hourly contract, and this is the one I was mentioning on the prior slide, evaluating the value add of machine learning to customer-facing endpoints for already existing tech company. And then, a project I'm working on right now is doing this cloud automation for a media tracking company. And what's nice here is that, and this is another note that's worth keeping in mind if you are kind of on this path like I am. This is a returning customer, right? So this was actually the same client as the one. I don't think I have the laser pointer here. Oh, you can see my mouse. This debugging error in a cloud data warehouse and this are the same client, right? So kind of established a relationship with them on some hourly work. And kind of knew that their business had the potential for value from some automation, from some migrating to the cloud, and so we were able to do some follow-on work together, which is awesome. Well, that's my journey. Those are my approaches. I'm kind of climbing the independent tech consultant ladder, but maybe you're not. Maybe you want to do other stuff, right? And so it's always good to keep in mind that there's still more, right? One takeaway from this talk should be that if you want to become, or you already are, an independent software consultant, you should work however you want. You should do whatever you want, price however you want, work with whoever you want. It's totally up to you. And that also means pricing however you want, right? And so with this, it's worth noting that there are more pricing models than just hourly and project-based prices, right? So here's the pricing model spectrum. On one end, you have hourly pricing, and you have project-based pricing on the other end. And you can have a monthly retainer. Maybe you say, hey, you know what? You can pay me on an estimated 50 hours of work per month, or even pay me a fixed amount, and you can just contact me for basically any issue that arises or any question that you may have anytime during the month. Right? That's not quite hourly pricing, but it's kind of closer to hourly pricing. You can also do a project-based price with some sort of monthly or hourly billed maintenance, right? So sometimes it's nice if you can offer a maintenance period to your client, like, hey, I'm going to, in this last couple of weeks or in this last month of the project, I'm going to deploy it, go live, monitor it, test it. But then after that, once it's been deployed for a couple of months and everything's working, if there's any maintenance beyond that, you can choose to say, okay, I want to bill hourly for the maintenance. You can also offer it for free. Depends totally on you, on the approach that you want to take. Or finally, you can have a kind of on the other end of project-based pricing, you can have a productized service, right? Maybe there's a service like, hey, instantiate my analytics infrastructure for a startup, right? This is quite common. I've seen it a few times where, a startup gets funding and they're like, great, we are sick and tired of querying our backend databases for analytics. We want to set up some real data warehouse, right? So maybe you have a productized service where you kind of advertise one thing on your website. This is what I do. Fixed price, advertise to the world, right? That's kind of like a productized service. It's a bit beyond project-based pricing. And that's all. Thank you very much. And I'll look forward to any questions you have.
Well, let's thank Ben for a wonderful talk, and let's open up for Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get questions going. I guess while we wait, we have one in the chat here from Kristen. I think she may have had to drop, but she asked, have you found pricing instances where you've moved from one of these strategies to being onto retainer? So let's see, is one pricing strategy more lucrative for moving to retainer? I guess you kind of touched on that toward the end, but maybe it's more toward like starting with hourly, then moving to retainer, or starting with project-based and moving to retainer.
Right. I haven't done that. I'm not, I don't think I've ever done a retainer-based pricing. However, the way I would probably work it in is, to say, hey, I would probably work it into project-based pricing. So I would say, and this is something I consider right now, actually, on some projects. how I would do it is I would say, hey, I'm going to build you a project. I'll deliver you some solution. It's going to take me a month. It's going to cost this much. And then I will give you free maintenance for 2 months because, maybe something goes wrong. But after that, I will, some fixed price per month, and I'll basically fix any issues that come up. I guess the trick there is, you always have to be cautious that, they know that an issue versus a new feature, that's kind of on you to sell it or to communicate it in the right way. Because you also have to be careful, right? When an issue comes up, I actually dealt with a situation like this recently, where the client was like, they had already paid me, the project was done. They're like, hey, the dashboard isn't working. I was like, crap, like, let me check. Did I do something wrong? And I checked it out, and I hadn't done anything wrong. It was just that the data that the system was receiving had kind of a new data quality quirk to it that I had never seen before during development. And so in this case, yeah, it's probably best to do some sort of like retainer-based pricing for that, where you give like a fixed cost per month to kind of fix stuff like that just comes up. That's the nature of software. But yeah.
No, I like that model. Like, you build the project and you include X amount of months of ongoing maintenance. That's cool. Let's see, any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Yeah, Alejandro, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the talk. Just a quick question. How do you make yourself a name? I mean, I understand you passed for several companies, but then when you want to become independent, it's kind of hard to get clients, right? So you started with Upwork. I think it still is hard in the sense that there are, different pricing, depends on where you live and so on. So it's hard to compete. I mean, could you just tell us your story on that regard?
Sure. Well, I would say, when I was first considering being switching to independent, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, I asked, a colleague, or a friend of mine who was, an independent software consultant, what would you do if you're employed? What if you could go back as an employee? What would you do to kind of set yourself up? Because going kind of cold turkey, as we'd say, going cold turkey or just switching straight up, quitting your job and just going for it, like Shaw did. No, actually, Shaw didn't quite do that. It can be a bit risky, and you don't have to do it that way. I think that some of the stuff that you really can set up your foundation is, writing kind of some of the stuff I mentioned, writing blog posts, becoming more active on LinkedIn. You have to worry about you basically have to answer the question of where do you want your leads to come from? And they can come from anywhere. You can write a newsletter, you can write blog posts, you can go and give talks at conferences, and then people come up to you and are like, hey, that's cool. I might be interested in this, or I know somebody who needs something that just like this. YouTube is an option, right? Or you can even write like proof of concept articles online, and that you think might work for some businesses, and send those as cold reach outs, right? So I'd say the lead generation process is kind of up to you, whatever kind of floats your boat, whatever you're most interested in. In terms of kind of making the name for yourself, I think that all this kind of content marketing, any kind of those lead generation processes go hand in hand with kind of creating social proof for yourself, right? And that's really what creating a name for yourself, that's really what that is, like building a brand, right? So yeah, whatever that is, about building a brand. And then about taking on the first projects, different people have different experiences. I did my first freelancing contract while I was still employed, and I did it at a price that I think is now half of my my typical rate. So, and that was a benefit of being employed, right? I was like, I value, I can take like a lower price right now to get the experience because I have the safety net of employment. So for me, that was great. I'm not sure if I had kind of gone cold turkey or just straight up quit and gone independent, I'm not sure that I would have had the same stomach to take on the low prices at the beginning that I did while employed. So if yeah, taking on tech consulting jobs is something you want, or becoming a full-time tech consultant, yeah, I recommend, basically setting the groundwork while you're already employed, because I think that is probably a common path. You go and you work at some, in some companies for a few years, and then you become independent. And then there was one other thing I wanted to say about it, and I think I forgot. And yes, the final thing is that this is kind of a bit of a hack, honestly, but making a name for yourself can just mean getting testimonials, right? And so you can do some sort of huge 2-year-long project where where you build or 2 years is crazy, right? Let's make something more real. For a huge 4-month project where you build an MVP for a startup company, maybe something like that. You're only going to get one testimonial out of that, right? It might be a great project, but how the internet is going to see it, or how the public eye is going to see it, it's just one testimonial. So it's a bit of a hack, and maybe maybe you don't want to, but yeah, starting off with many smaller projects where you can quickly get testimonials, and also build up trust as well. Maybe you need to build the confidence. That's also was a real part of it for me. Was I didn't trust myself to take on huge projects at the very beginning. And now I do. But it's also because of taking on many of these smaller projects. The main thing is many small projects, many testimonials. That looks good.
And you mentioned early on you were doing Upwork, and then you had some returning customers and stuff. Is Upwork still the main way you're getting your current clients?
The main way I'm getting my clients right now is returning customers.
Nice.
And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
When they run out of stuff for me to do. But beyond that, I get some inbound leads on LinkedIn. I'd say when it comes to inbound leads, it's probably, or when it comes to just new leads, right? It's probably maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say, maybe 60% was from Upwork, and then the remaining 40% is people who found me online and messaged me on LinkedIn and on email. But in terms of cold leads, those are obviously only Upwork. I'm applying to stuff, or people invite me to apply to stuff. But then everything else is kind of inbound. So it's hard to kind of
right.
I haven't really quantified it. Maybe
got to build out your analytics infrastructure for your sales pipeline. All right, Daniel, go ahead.
Thanks for the talk. That was really interesting, because I've had several experiences similar to you. There's one question I do have, just in terms of the hourly rate. I know that you're using cloud, so I've gone through this thing too where I feel guilty in terms of if I charge too much. So it's kind of trying to calibrate that business value that you're actually delivering to the clients. You have actually a clear conscience of saying, okay, this is going to be $200 an hour, and you're breaking it down based on cloud costs or potential cloud costs, right? Because there's also the amount of data issue and how you're going to scale it and that kind of thing. So you could be, if you undercharge, you're kind of screwing yourself, in terms of what you're talking about in terms of the risk, right? Because it's hey, I'm going to deliver this project at the end, and you build the data pipelines, and the data, it just ends up, the cloud cost ends up being a lot more, for example, right? Or the time. So it's calibrating that project prior to doing it. Because I've worked as a consultant previously, and it was totally by accident, but I got a client that was a furniture sale company. I mean, they were doing a lot of sales a year, and they never had this data. They never had data science. They didn't know a lick, basically. So the challenge was, one, educating them, right? what's the business value, right? Like, what can I use this for? You know, and I was like saying, oh, you could do recommendation algorithms, you could cross-sell products based on that. We could calculate some kind of like expected value type of thing per product based on these like cross-selling, upselling type of things. But they didn't know like, okay, you have to migrate the data into like a big platform. Like I was using Azure, and you have to like maintain it and all this stuff. And me at that time, like I had no clue about costs. And I undercharged, by the way. So that was the moral of the story is that I undercharged and I put in way more effort, and I ended up not being happy at the end. You know what I mean? I don't know how the client. I gave them all the code, and I you know, like to the data. They didn't even have like guys that knew how to code or anything like that. But I was just like, I give you all the code, the dashboards, all the things that you know I did to generate it. So like, yeah, I'm just curious like what your thoughts are in terms of kind of optimizing that cost, because you have to take into account and be pretty nimble about if you're taking on, and it's also like, okay, the size of the client, right? Because you're not going to go to a small client that's making $1 million a year and charge them like, you know what I mean? So it's like their market cap, what's their sales? Like this is like valuable information to get prior to even like making an hourly rate. So it's like if you stick it on like the website and say like it's 100, that's why for me it's like I rather do like private conversations in terms of pricing, because then you can kind of get a sense of like what your client is actually doing versus, hey, it's just this sticker price 100, and they're like, you're kind of screwing yourself in the sense that you don't know what you're getting yourself into too. So that's my experience. It's like a bad one, but it's a learning thing that you could kind of, I mean, I could use in the future, but that was just my issue. I was just wondering what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
It's a complicated situation. It's a complicated topic if you really get into the weeds of it, you know. So.
I mean, I think it's a great question. I'm really glad you asked it. And I think there's actually a few questions in there. The first question is, how do you decide your hourly rate? The second question is, who pays for cloud costs? And the third question is, you know, kind of specifics on this kind of client interaction you had.
Yeah.
So going in order, what did I say the first question was? Is how do you decide your hourly rate? You know, it's funny when you're talking about the hourly rate and you're saying, oh, I need to, like, how do I know? Because I don't know how much the project is going to cost me in terms of cloud costs. How do I price myself? Like, I have to predict what the costs are going to be. And I would say my advice on that one would be, don't think about your costs as much as you think about their value.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's like a mindset shift that I'm also kind of in the process of taking, quite honestly. But, you know, it's kind of like you said, they didn't have people who could even adopt the code, take it over. You know, they didn't really know necessarily what you were even doing. So all they cared about was like they wanted to probably, you know, get data-driven business value, right? What does that mean for them? I mean, you can kind of do some, if you want to customize an hourly rate, you can kind of say, you could say like, you know, if I do one project a year for these guys, and I think that each project is going to add, you know, 100K of value to their business, and it's going to take me 100 hours, then each hour of my time is worth this much to them, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, then you can say, oh, that number comes out to $20 an hour. Okay, I don't think that we can make a deal here.
Right.
Or you can say, oh, $200 an hour. Normally, I've been charging $50 an hour. Let me just go up to 100. They're still getting a great deal. I'm getting a great deal. That's awesome, right? So kind of doing this value to them, cost to you arithmetic, you know, helps you kind of decide what your kind of room to price in is. And then you can kind of decide from there. That's the first answer to that. The second answer to that is that I think I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this a few months ago. But pricing yourself as a freelancer is it's a bit like buying a diamond, right? People you can make diamonds in a lab now, right? And it's like a tenth of the price or something like that. In general, it's crazy, but people are still buying the, the mined diamonds, even though they're basically identical. So, and nobody, the human eye can't tell the difference. You buy the diamond, and you never really question it again. You don't like, take it, ooh, yeah, look at those like features in there. I'm glad I have this mined diamond. Who does that? Nobody does that, right? So the value of this product to you is actually the price, right? So, and I think that, clients or people shopping around for software consultants are often like this as well. It's like they're shopping for diamonds because they don't really necessarily know. If they see somebody who's like, oh, this guy charges $250 an hour, that's like that he must be the real deal. I got to get this guy on. But if you're charging like 50 an hour, maybe they're or like 20 an hour or even less, like, they might think to themselves, I got to get somebody else who's more professional and more experienced, right? So, and then, but there is, of course, like people are deal seekers. Some people are looking for a deal and don't have the money to afford. And also some of these smaller scoped projects might be smaller businesses who have smaller revenue and smaller opportunities and want to pay smaller amounts. So I don't know. These are all kind of, it's actually, I think it's actually hard to kind of, customize an hourly rate. It's hard to come up with an hourly rate. The second question, but those are some thoughts about it, right? The second question you asked, well, not really a question, but you're talking about you didn't know your cloud costs. I personally, every contract I have, I always put in there like, the client acknowledges or the company acknowledges that they are responsible for paying like all cloud infrastructure costs or the cost of cloud computing, right? And so I'll often like create the cloud infrastructure for them or help them do it over a Meets call. And then they give me the credentials that I need to do everything, or I'll create it for them and then, change the ownership to them or do it with an email address that they want and then give them the credentials or something like that. Unless I have a great relationship with the client and I know the data is small and I know that the cloud costs are going to be nominal anyway. But yeah, usually I make sure that the cloud cost is going to be the client's responsibility. I think I had a recent project where there was some geocoding involved, and every geocoding request was like, it's a half a cent. It's a crazy expensive. And I think it ends up being like something like $50, like maybe nothing crazy. It's like but it's $15 a month. So if that's just on my account, I don't want to be chasing the client down and say, hey, I don't want to kill your dashboard, but you like take over these credentials or something, or like it's just best if you can get that sorted from the beginning. Then the third, it can, by the way, it can slow you down a little bit at the beginning, but like you just kind of have to protect yourself. The third thing is kind of just generally talking about this interaction you had or this relationship that you had. Personally, in my mind, just from everything you said about the project, that to me sounds like would have served well as a fixed price project, because sounds like the client wasn't so technically literate. They didn't really, have any value to glean from the code itself, from the software itself, but they had a value to glean from the outcome that the software was going to bring. And so, and like also they kind of had some fixed idea. They're like, we want some sort of, we just want like these 1, 2, or 3 machine learning products integrated into our application. So in that case, I probably would have said, okay, here's the fixed price. And if they ask, and you can put it in a proposal, like here are the tasks, going to build out the infrastructure, going to, build this model, going to deploy this model, just so like this is what I'm going to be doing. And at the end, you'll get this thing, and then, it's going to cost you this much. And then, that's probably how I would have approached it. Of course, I mean, I don't know all the details of this relationship that you had. Sometimes it was also pretty picky.
It was what I kind of learned was like, there's clients that you're going to have. Well, this was one client, but you're going to have people that know something about data science and machine learning, and then you're going to have people that know nothing. and they've kind of caught onto the wave. So it's like it's kind of like almost like a process where you have to educate, and that's
Yeah.
a little bit challenging as well, because you're talking a language in terms of like trying to transfer over technical knowledge to business value. All they care about is the business value, right? And if you've been a
Yeah.
data scientist for a couple of years in a company, like you yourself probably don't know how much value. I mean, I worked as a contractor at Microsoft, and I'm like, I have no idea. If you were
Right.
to say like expected value of a model, dollar value, like what? Because I was doing forecasting, like I had no clue. Like if I built the model, if I tuned the model correctly, how much dollar value that actually had, right? So it's like kind of that challenge where like even you like it's like, okay, can you lay out like a specific and a specific like plan for these people, which actually creates business value. And it's not just marketing. Do you see what I'm saying? Because people get caught up with the marketing. Like people get up with the whole thing that they glean on something like in the news, and they're like, oh my God, AI is going to take over our jobs. You know, I better
Yeah.
do something about it. And it's
Yeah.
like they're driven by that kind of fear impulse versus like a rational long-term approach to how data could,
Right.
provide value, in the sense that like, yeah, you know, if you have a forecasting system, you automate it, you don't have to guesswork every month. We calibrate it each month. Basically, you know, your inventory levels will be matching demand, and that'll save you money. So that kind of business value that's added, but they're not going to go. They're the way that the last client that I had is purely instinctual. It's like, oh, everybody's doing it. I'm missing out. That kind of fear, and you're like, they're not rational at that point, where you could like lay out something that's like, hey,
It's so
you know,
funny.
there's a commitment that you have to make. Like you might not see the fruits, because I can't say like you can't say in each engagement, hey, I'm going to save you $1 million. It's just not. But there's something along the lines where there's some kind of discovery or some kind of innovation that could kind of come out of it. But people have to have kind of like this risk-oriented mindset. I that's what I found, like where I was like thinking, you have to have a risk-oriented mindset as well, because it's kind of like a new thing, right? And it's like a data discovery thing, and it's like an innovation. There's possibility of innovation that could occur, but it's not like I can guarantee you, hey, we're going to make millions of dollars. This is all, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So any case, that's just
So I'm gonna jump in. We got time for one more question, so we'll go ahead and move on to Faraz. Thanks for the question, Daniel.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm gonna keep it short. I guess my question kind of aligns with titling and some of these terminologies. I see freelancer, I see data consultant. Are they really the same thing, or is it different? You have freelancers who are working on contracts, like they could even work as a hybrid job. But then you have consultants. I really get myself messed up when I'm trying to define things. Yeah.
Interesting. It's a great question. I'm not sure I can even answer that. There's also contractor, by the way. You can be a contractor, you can be a consultant, you can be a freelancer, you can be an independent, you can be an entrepreneur. I don't know. It's kind of like AI and machine learning and data science. You know, everybody is going to tell you something different depending on the year. I mean, I'm not sure. I think of contractor and consultant to me mean the same thing mostly. A consultant feels like it's more general somehow. Like it can be you're running a consulting business, and you can be a consultant that works at that consultant business. I guess if you're a contractor, or I guess if you're a freelancer, you're probably working on a contract or that or some temporary, more like temporary employment kind of thing. Or a contractor is somewhere in the middle of those two, or it's somehow a combination of those two. But I don't know. That's my sense. That's my sense. But I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure, honestly.
I feel like in Europe, I see more people calling themselves freelancers, but in North America,
that reminds me. That's actually exactly what I wanted to say. I think I'm glad you reminded me. So I live in Germany. I'm from the US, but I live in Germany. And like just the way that the labor laws are set up in the US, if you're an employee, you can get fired and you have like 2 weeks more. You could have worked at a place for 20 years. If you get fired, you got two more weeks left. And then like they can, I think, actually not sure what the laws say they have to give you for severance. But after that, you're pretty much on your own. You can go get like unemployment from the government or whatever it is. If you get fired in Germany, where I live, I forget, it's 3 months. Instead of it being 2 weeks, it's a 3-month notice period. So if you've worked there for more than 6 months, it's a 3-month notice period. So a lot of companies, at least from what I've seen, a lot of companies in Germany, way more than the US, they're like, oh, we want this kind of like casual, temporary like employment like they have in the US. So they'll just hire freelancers, right? And so freelancers, how it ends up being in practice is freelancers can end up working at a company for like 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years on the same kind of freelancer contract. But just what the company benefits is that, they can just fire them very easily. So I think, and that's just Germany versus the US, right? Those are the two countries in which I've worked. So I imagine if you go to other countries, it's probably even more different. But yeah, that I think your observation is, I've observed the same thing. I think in Germany and possibly in Europe, there's a lot more of these kind of freelancers, and in the US, it's like, well, everybody's basically a freelancer anyway, by the way our laws are set up. So maybe there's less of a need for that kind of middle type of employee, basically. But yeah.
All right, well, let's thank Ben once again for a wonderful talk and discussion afterwards. Thank you all for your questions. So next week, we'll have a podcast episode hosted live on our YouTube channel, where I'll be talking to Luis Serrano, who, if you guys don't know who that is, you should check out his YouTube channel. He's a great AI educator. So we'll be talking about his journey as a YouTuber. We'll be talking about AI, and we'll be talking about, the value of education and where AI is going. So thank you guys once again, and we'll see you in the next one.